There is no empirical evidence that people need empirical evidence to believe that they have empirical evidence for their beliefs. I'm going to repeat that one more time. There is no empirical evidence that people need empirical evidence to believe that they have empirical evidence for their beliefs. Now, do you believe me? Do you believe I'm right about this? Do you believe what I said was true? What was your evidence for that? Because when I thought about this, I was like, wait, this is such a clear thing to think of. Now, let me actually break down some of the definitions of what I'm talking about here. When I talk about belief, it's just a certain confidence in something. You just believe something. I don't think beliefs are necessarily intentional. As in, there's no direct conscious effort for you to actually believe something. I can't not believe something and just force myself to believe it. Like, for example, I can't be standing outside in the rain and have it be raining on me and me actually be covered in fluid called water and just force myself to believe that I'm not getting rained on, that I am not currently wet. Now, something that could change is if I just sit there and I think, okay, I believe I'm the wettest I could possibly be. That's something that could change from many things. First of all, I could have been thrown in a pool of water before and know how it feels to be completely drenched. It could be a situation like the one I remember when I was a kid living in an estate and we were running around. We could see the wall of water coming. So sometimes in a storm, you can actually see more rain coming. You can actually see the wall of water. Or I could be standing on the side of a road and I could see a car or a truck or something just coming down and there's water on the side of the road and I just see this huge wave and splashing and think if that car passes, I'll be wetter than I am. Then I won't believe that I am as wet as I can be anymore because I have all these other things to refer to. So then my belief can change on how wet I am, but just the wet itself, you'd have to change what I actually define liquid and fluid and wetness as to change that whole thing. But the actual experience of being wet, that is something that is actually just there. That is not something I can just consciously change without something else to refer to. So that's a difference there. There's a qualitative thing, being wet, and then the quantitative thing, how wet I am. And those two things rely on different kind of things. They're related to the same thing, with different kinds of things. And I think there's a confusion there. So let me get into defining terms of this actual shorty, this actual thought that I had. People not needing empirical evidence to actually believe that they have empirical evidence for what they believe. So let's start with empirical. We'll go here to Merriam-Webster, which is my go-to on this. Adjective. Empirical. Empirical. Some people say empirical. Do you say M or empirical? Let me know. Definitions of empirical. I'm going to go between both of them just to annoy people. Uh, originating in or based on observation or experience, empirical data. Relying on experience or observation alone, often without due regard for system and theory, an empirical basis for the theory. Number 3, capable of being verified or disproved by observation or experiment, empirical laws. Number 4, of or relating to empiricism. Before I get to evidence, think about what's being said here. Originating in or based on observation or experience, without due regard for system or theory. But also goes here to say capable of being verified or disproved by observation or experiment. So this goes into the importance that you have to get to a situation where you establish what exactly you're talking about when you're talking to other people. Next example here, evidence. Noun. Definition of evidence, entry 1 of 2. 1a, an outward sign, indication. 1b, something that furnishes proof, testimony. Specifically, something legally submitted to a tribunal to ascertain the truth of a matter. Number 2, one who bears witness, especially one who voluntarily confesses a crime and testifies for the prosecution against one's accomplices. In evidence. Number 1, to be seen, conspicuous. Trim laws are everywhere in evidence. Number 2, as evidence. And now the example here is, definition is evidence verb. Definition of evidence, entry 2 of 2. Transitive verb, to offer evidence, prove, evince. So that's it for the definition of the separate terms. We're going to go into some more, but then that's the thing. Something is given. If it's just observed, something could be observed and could be thought of as something else. There was a time when people observed what they thought about the world. It's still the time. It's still that time for some people. It's still current year for some people. There was some time when, from the observations, people thought the world was flat, the world was the center of the earth, the world was 6,000 years old, the world was made in 7 days, the world is just some dream or some kind of sky creature. So there's these things that people observe these things. Doesn't mean it's the actual case, but that was the observed evidence that they had for this. Now next I'm going to go to definitions.net because now this is using empirical evidence together. Those two separate terms that I defined there, now this is how they're often used together. So into the reading. Empirical evidence is a sort of knowledge acquired by a means of observation or experimentation. Empirical evidence is information that justifies a belief in the truth or falsity of an empirical claim. In the empiricist's view, one can only claim to have the knowledge when one has true belief based on empirical evidence. This stands in contrast to the rationalist view, under which reason or reflection alone is considered to be evidence for the truth or falsity of some propositions. The senses are the primary source of empirical evidence, although other sources of evidence, such as memory and the testimony of others, ultimately trace back to some sensory experience. They are considered to be secondary or indirect. In another sense, empirical evidence may be synonymous with the outcome of an experiment. In this sense, an empirical result is unified confirmation. In this context, the term semi-empirical is used for qualifying theoretical methods which use in part basic axioms or postulated scientific laws and experimental results. Such methods are opposed to theoretical ab initio methods, which are purely deductive and based on first principles. So there's some terms in here that might be unfamiliar to some. You can go out and you can check those terms out just to clarify what was being said here. But I think this is a good example to show that some things seem to fit into this and some things do not. Some people will have that crossover and say that something they consider empirical is now going to be evidence for something where there actually is almost no empirical evidence. There is almost nothing you can actually test and have an experiment on to actually back that up. But then they'll erroneously put those two things together. So this is often something that I think is more close to beliefs that people have on sociology, on the social sciences, on the feelings, on culture, and things like this, which is very subjective things here. But now there's here something from the Corporate Finance Institute. What is empirical evidence? And I think when you talk about something like in economics, when you're talking about with math, when you're talking about with certain sciences, certain scientific processes, where you're dealing with hard data or somewhat defined things. I was just thinking about this separate actual thing here, but we don't even know, do you even think we know all the elements that exist in the world? But from the elements that we know, and we track these elements and say these elements behave in this way, they just found some place in like Antarctica where like supposedly some particles are somehow moving in the past and saying this might be evidence for time travel, where like there was a time when people were like, oh, time travel can be done, and then there was a time when people were like, no, time travel is impossible because if you go back in time and you change something in the time, or people are like, oh, you can only time travel to the time when there actually is a time machine, and there's all these things according to that. Some of the things we just don't know. So it's like you're allowed to believe things, but don't just say like all your beliefs are empirical evidence. No. There's very specific things that empirical evidence actually applies to, and I think the ones that you have empirical evidence for should be your stronger beliefs. But certain things, just agree and be like, yeah, there's some things I believe that I'm not quite sure. I have certain friends that I think like me. I don't know. I think that girl smiling at me liked me. I think that's what she's doing. So I'm not completely sure. I'm gonna go ask her out, and she says no, and then I'm like, yep, maybe she did. Maybe it was something else. Maybe now I'm being accused of sexual harassment or something. I don't know. It sucks, but these are the risks that people take. And some things you have more evidence for, some other things you don't. Okay, so let's go into this. What is empirical evidence? And again, this is from Corporate Finance Institute. Empirical evidence is the information obtained through observation and documentation of certain behavior and patterns, or through an experiment. Empirical evidence is a quintessential part of the scientific method or research that is applicable in many disciplines. In the scientific method, the pieces of empirical evidence are used to validate or disprove a stated hypothesis, statement, or claim. In the scientific world, a hypothesis can be accepted by the community only if sufficient empirical evidence that supports a hypothesis is provided. Now, again, in this one, now also, you say believe in the science, trust in the science. Look at this, look at that. You look across the board. Just because something is science, is scientific, doesn't mean it has the same level of rigor. You look at certain fields and the testability of the actual things, the peer review is not up to the same level as it is in other places. So these are some things that are good to double check. So breaking down the evidence. I'm going to skip over this paragraph here and kind of summarize what's left here. There's a few paragraphs here. So in this one, it's talking about breaking down the evidence. It's talking about the different ways to do this. Types of empirical evidence. The two primary types of empirical evidence are qualitative evidence and quantitative evidence. This is what I'd mentioned before, and let me see if I was kind of accurate with my general observation of it. I hadn't read through this article before coming here. Okay, so here, qualitative evidence is a type of data that describes non-measurable information. Qualitative data is used in various disciplines, notably in the social sciences, as well as in market research and finance. In such fields, the research generally investigates human behavior and its patterns. The non-measurable nature of qualitative data, as well as its subjective analysis, makes it prone to potential biases. Quantitative. Quantitative evidence refers to numerical data that can be further analyzed using mathematical and/or statistical methods. Quantitative data is used in almost every discipline in science. Unlike qualitative data, the evidence obtained using quantitative data is generally considered to be unbiased, as the validity of the data can be easily verified using mathematical/statistical calculations or analysis. So it's rate the readings here. It says a financial modeling, evaluation, and analyst. So just think about this thing. Accounting, I think that would be more something that is based on quantitative kind of observations and work and processes. When you're talking about the stock market and investing, that is more in qualitative. You're trying to thinking, is this going to go this way? Is that going to go this way? Are people going to buy this? Are people going to value this? So that's kind of the thing. So what I was talking before might not have been exactly with the qualitative quantitative, but let me know what you think about this. Because I was thinking, the reason I came to this, I was just looking around and I just thought, what kind of test would I have to make to make me think, to make me believe that most people actually have empirical testable evidence, have tested their actual belief systems, or it's just things that they just believe because they believe. But most of these people, most definitely, in my experience, do think they have good reasons. And you already have. Just having a reason because somebody told me is already enough of a reason. But is that a valid reason? What kind of quality of reason is that? What's the value of that reason empirically as evidence? Okay, that's it for now. Part of my shorty series where I expand on these short thoughts and engage with you in the conversations and in videos or wherever I post these. Let me know what you think in the comment section, because this one for me, I think it's complete. I think it was more just defining the things, just trying to make understood what I mean by this thing. And if this is something that puzzles you as well, or if you think you understand what I'm trying to say, or you think you can clear me out with some actual evidence or some actual, just some way to deal with my confusion here, let me know in the comment section. Much value that you just took your time to listen to this. Till next one, like, share, subscribe, links to merchandise store where I post different things. I don't know if this one can make a shirt. I don't know. Till next time, goodbye.
You.